Hey everyone, thanks so much for watching my Mt Whitney video and for all of the positive comments. That was one of my favorite videos I've ever created, and it was so cool to see so many people connect with it and be excited about it. And so I just wanted to make this video to share some of the tips that I have if you're gonna plan to hike Mt Whitney next year. By far, the first thing you have to do is decide whether you're gonna hike it in 1 day or 2 days, as that's gonna determine which type of permit you wanna pick up in order to do your hike. A 1-day hike is the most brutal because people will leave at 1 to 2 a.m. and not get back into their car sometimes until dusk. You also have to deal with elevation when you ascend that fast, and just how overall difficult a 21-mile round-trip hike with 6,000 feet of elevation is. You can carry a smaller pack with you if you do a 1-day hike, but you need to be a lot more prepared physically and mentally. 1-day hiking Mt Whitney is a massive undertaking and should not be taken lightly. Because of all this, I've never done a 1-day ascent and I don't really have any desire to. 2 days is tough enough, but I like being able to hike the beautiful trail in the light and just enjoy the overall hike more instead of running up in the dark. Of course, it's totally up to you, but you definitely need to decide whether it's 1 day or 2 before you apply for permits. Following that, let's talk a little bit about the hiking season, which is generally only around 3 months out of the year unless you have extensive winter mountaineering experience. For most people, Mt Whitney is hiked mid-June to late September, and that totally depends on the year, as sometimes mid-June can have too much snow and you have to push it off into July. If you're looking to apply for permits, most people will try to get July or August, as that's the best possibility for the trail to be free of snow and for the weather to be good. However, in 2023, there was still snow on the trail well into August, and when I did it in 2012, there was no snow on the trail in late June. So the rain and snow each year will affect the window for hiking. Most years though, the trail is not technical from July through September, so that's the best time to try and go. Also, I can't stress this enough, if you get a permit and the snow is not off the switchbacks, you should not attempt the hike without previous experience on big mountains where you will use an ice axe, crampons, and things like that. This is not a mountain that you want to mess around with, and it's way better to wait for another year and try to apply and get a better permit than trying to do something that you're not prepared for. Alright, following that, let's talk about permits and how to at least try to get one. If you're asking whether I need a permit, you definitely do. I've been checked for the permit every time that I've done it, and I've seen people turned around every time I've done it as well who didn't have a permit. So you do not want to risk it, as you want to make sure you have the best chance for success. Of course, the only problem with permits is that they're incredibly hard to get, and permits are given out via a lottery system. I've applied to it 5 to 6 times, and I've only been chosen in the lottery system once. Your best odds are on a weekday since fewer people pick those days, but it's still a long shot every year because it's such a popular trail. Last year, the permit application was open from February 1st to March 1st, and then the announcement was made on who got permits on March 15th. I would recommend checking the website to make sure this is still the date moving forward, but you do have a 30-day window in order to apply. If you don't get picked, then I recommend looking at recreation.gov for the day that the unclaimed permits are released. This is what I did this year, as it said that unclaimed permits were going to be released on a specific day, and I was on there waiting right at the time that they were released, and that's how I was able to get my permits this year. They went incredibly fast, and most all of them were snatched up within the first minute or two, but if you don't get selected in the lottery and you have multiple days when you can go, be on there right when those unreleased permits come out, and maybe you'll get lucky like I did this year. My last tip is to look at this website called Outdoor Status. I just found out about this last year, but it's worked good for me on a couple things that I've tried to do. And basically the site just monitors for cancellations, and if there's a cancellation for the date range that you're looking for, then they'll email you and you can go and try to get it before somebody else. It is a paid site, but I've done it once and I was able to get a permit for the thing that I was looking to get a permit for, so that might be an option if you really want to hike Mt Whitney and you only have some specific days. Alright, so let's assume you got a permit, and now let's start talking about training for this gigantic undertaking you're about to do. First off, Mt Whitney is a tough mountain to hike. The trail itself is straightforward with nothing technical as long as there's not any snow, but it does require a lot of mental and physical training. The hike is 21 miles round trip with 6,000 feet of elevation gain, which is a lot. Plus it tops out over 14,000 feet, meaning that the altitude can do a number on you as well. I recommend training on long hikes with as much elevation gain as possible. This is easy where I live, as in Southern California there's lots of big hikes with lots of elevation gain like San Gorgonio or Mount Baldy or San Bernardino, and I have videos on all those hikes in the description if you're interested. However, if you're coming from an area without many mountains, you want to train hard on the Stairmaster at your local gym as much as possible, and even consider coming out to California and doing a few of the bigger hikes before your summit attempt, just to see how you do on long hikes with high elevation. All this to say that you really need to train for this if you want to be successful, and the best way to do that is to get on some big mountains with long mileage and lots of elevation. The next thing you need to think about is how to acclimatize and not get elevation sickness. Acclimatizing is one of the biggest issues people have on the mountain, even if they've trained well beforehand. On both of the summits, I've made it a point to come up the night before and spend the night at the Whitney Portal campground. Since I'm coming from around sea level, this gives me a night at 8,000 feet, and then when I'm hiking up to trail camp, that gives me another night at 12,000 feet before summiting at 14,000 feet. Having more time at high elevations decreases your risk of any altitude-related issues, but of course you never know, and even spending this amount of time, you could still have issues with the hike like this. Be sure to check with the members of your group while you're hiking, make sure no one has any bad headaches or deliriousness or things like that, as it's much more important, of course, to get people down the hill if they're dealing with any elevation issues than it is to try to summit. You can find out a lot more about the symptoms of elevation sickness online if you're wanting to look into that before you go as well. Alright, now let's talk about packing, and this is all of the gear that I brought with me on my last 2-day summit attempt. I'll put all of it up on the screen right here, and then let's talk about a few of the items, and if you have any other questions about packing, be sure to let me know those in the comments. Of course, you know the main things. You'll need a sleeping bag, you'll need a mattress if you want one, an inflatable pillow if you want one, and of course a tent. We used a 2-person tent, and I carried the tent and my friend carried the bear box with the food, so that's a good way to kind of split up the weight if you need to do that. You are required to bring a bear box, so you can either rent one or you can purchase one for the trip. I also highly recommend hiking poles, as you will want to take the weight of your pack off your knees. Next, of course, you'll need food, and you'll need Jetboil with fuel if you're planning to bring a backpacker meal. In terms of clothing, I recommend a pair of pants that can convert into shorts, a shirt, a puffy jacket, and some type of wind jacket. The coldest I've ever been in my life was on the way to the summit the first time I did it, so this time I brought way more than I needed to try to compensate for that. I brought long underwear, a thermal undershirt, gloves, and a beanie. I will say that I wore all of this when I left camp on my summit day, and it was still very cold even without a lot of wind. So definitely consider your cold tolerance and be prepared for it to be very, very cold as you make your way to the summit. Also, you'll need a headlamp because you're going to start in the early morning to do the switchbacks, and I recommend bringing a small, lightweight, packable day pack so you don't have to bring your full backpack all the way to the summit. I'll leave a link to all these things in the description if you want to know what I used, and a few more random things I have are electrolytes, a couple of Benadryl pills in case someone has a reaction to something, sunglasses, sunscreen, chapstick, and earplugs for sleeping. You are required to have a wag bag if you need to use the bathroom while on the trail. Normally they have those at the trailhead. They didn't have them when we went, but luckily we had purchased some at REI, so we already had some with us. Probably better to just grab a $1 or $2 one at REI so you don't have to rely on the trailhead. Let me know if you have any other questions though about packing, as this can definitely be one of the daunting things if you haven't done these types of hikes before. Alright, lastly, let's talk about water, which is the most important thing you need for a successful summit. It's really important to bring a water filter so that you can refill your bottles on the trail. Also, you'll want to find out where the reliable water sources are before you head out so you don't miss the last one, which is generally at trail camp. Depending on the year and how much rain there was, there may be a ton of water on the trail or there might not be much at all. When we went in 2023, there was so much water that you could refill constantly, and we didn't even have to carry very much water, which helped with our weight. That's not always the case though, so you do want to do research beforehand on where you can filter so you don't skip a spot, especially if you need water. We used one of the squeezable filters, and that ended up working out really great for us as it was lightweight and it worked well, but there's lots of other filter options if you want something different. I'm sure I probably missed something, but hopefully that helped you with planning your Mount Whitney trip, and be sure to let me know if you have any other questions in the comments. Of course, if you haven't already, be sure to watch my Mount Whitney Summit video right here, and we will see you on the next video.